For those of you who know me well, you know that I love heroes. I love a good hero story. Heroes, they stand for justice. They show that world justice through their compassion, empathy, their love of their fellow man, fellow humans. There are some that are called heroes that don't quite fit that bill, but a real hero responds to the world with the gifts they have for the better of humankind. In the movie world, we get a lot of heroes, a lot of hero movies. And everybody has their favorite. If you love hero movies or you love comics, everyone's got their genre. They love this, they love that. But typically, when a new character is presented to the world, we kind of get it in the middle of the story. And we get hooked on the hero, or we don't. But if it usually starts in the middle of their lifespan somewhere. And after those people who make those movies say, okay, yeah, this character is a good character, we like this character, people are responding to this character, then they go back and often make an origin story of that character. And even at times, after many years, they may go back and actually create a second origin story where some of the parts are the same, or not. But it's a second origin story anyway. Jesus is a hero. The first gospel that came out was Mark. The first time we see Jesus in Mark or hear anything is at the river when he's going to get baptized by John the Baptist. So that's the story. And it's a pretty clean story. It's a clean gospel. We get the essence of who Jesus is, and we get locked in, that there's something here. Well, the second gospel we have written was Matthew. Years, decades later. Now, like any good hero, Matthew includes some origin story. Not a lot. There's an angel that comes and pronounces that Jesus' mother would be conceived by the Holy Spirit. He announces that to Joseph. We hear a little bit about Joseph's story. And we hear in the Gospel of Matthew that this child was to be named Jesus and that he was born. A little bit on the end of that, we know that some magi show up and offer gifts, some special gifts, and that then through a dream to those magi, they let Jesus' parents know that it's not safe, that Herod is out to get them, and they flee to Egypt as refugees. It's an origin story of Matthew. So we go from no origin story to an origin story. Well, then Luke is written after Matthew. And we get a different origin story. Some of the things are the same. An angel comes and pronounces that this baby will have been conceived by the Holy Spirit. That's the important part, right? That announcement comes to Mary, not Joseph. In this origin story, they need to go from where they live to Nazareth to Bethlehem, and so we get this story that Luke writes, and we envision in our minds what it looks like, this traveling. We know that she is pregnant. We don't know how big she was pregnant, but that she was pregnant, and they made a trek from Nazareth to Bethlehem. There, we know that there was no room in the inn. That's actually a mistranslation. There was no room in the guest room. There were no hotels in Bethlehem, and so the upper room is where everyone stayed, and the animals came in at night, those that they could bring in for safety, and everybody was going to Bethlehem for this census, and so there was no room in the family sleeping quarters, and so others had to sleep below, and so that's where Mary and Joseph stayed, down below. We know that he was born. Same true to the origin story of Matthew. And in this story, he was swaddled and laid into a manger. It's beautiful imagery. In this story, the pronouncement comes to shepherds in the field, and they come. And I know it would have brought relief to Mary of knowing that someone else has too been told this story, this truth. And then the little shepherd boys go off and become the first voices, the first messengers of this story. So this origin story got even bigger in Luke than in Matthew. Decades later, John is written. We don't have an angel pronouncing this Immaculate Conception. We don't have any treks from one city to another. We don't have any wise men. We don't have any shepherds. We don't have the imagery that the other two writers brought to us. But we still have an origin story. It's almost like the two ends. We had one who introduces the character in Mark, no origin, but we as humans needed a little more. And so we got Matthew. And then we needed a little more, and we got Luke. And then what did we need? A different perspective of the truth. The origin story in John is in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life. And the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There's the origin story. People often argue about facts within the other origin stories. But the Gospel of John sums it up. What's most important after all these decades of Jesus being presented to now, finally, all these years and decades later, getting to John, John's like, no, we don't need those other things. What we need to know is the essence of the truth that's been presenting to us in this story. And John gives us that. What has come into being in him was life. And the life was the light for all people. We have our own origin stories. Some of them have lots of detail. Some of them have had the need to be rewritten because our perspectives changed as we got older and we could see things differently. But this is also our origin story too. No matter what life has brought us to this point, and no matter what our beginnings were like, because the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And later in John, we learn that there is this meshing where they say that God is in Jesus and Jesus is God and we are in Jesus, and there's this meld that we are a part of that divine story in the same way. And so as we think about our lives, whatever's brought us here today, know that this origin story is truly ours. And that we too are to show our heroic nature and to be the light for the world. Merry Christmas.